Welcome, everyone. I see that people are joining as attendees. This is our weekly webinar update on the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Elman, the principal investigator at UPenn in Philadelphia. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Elman to tell us more about her site and her involvement with the platform trial.
Thank you very much for having me today. There I am. So I'm pleased to be here representing the University of Pennsylvania, and we're very pleased to be part of the platform trial. If you go on to the next slide, I'll introduce my team. This is our team. I have to say, as I was making this slide, it occurred to me how much I really enjoy being part of this team. This is our multidisciplinary team. Right in the center of the slide, you can see Adrija Guharay. She's our research coordinator who coordinates this trial for us, and she's fantastic. She has a huge smile, and she's an extremely happy, cheerful person and does a wonderful job with our patients. Right beneath her are Jen and Leslie. They are a dietitian and speech and language pathologist, and that is a picture taken from the NEALS meeting back in the day when we used to be able to have a meeting of the team that brings you this trial in person. And that's a wonderful meeting that the NEALS group coordinates, where all of the investigators get together and share our experiences with research and have lectures about research and plan new research trials. And it's a really wonderful way for the ALS community at large to get together. And we continue that tradition even online as we make our way towards hopefully the end of the pandemic. But that's from a previous meeting. You can also see on this slide, the two men are one of our other neurologists, Dr. Quinn, and next to him is Dr. Akravo, our pulmonologist. I'm going to come back to him. On the other side of Adrija is our fabulous genetic counselor, Lainey Dratch, and another research coordinator, Luis Rosario. Beneath them is our physical therapist and occupational therapist. And in the other people that I didn't mention on the last slide is another neurologist and basic scientist who's doing research in AAV-mediated therapies, potentially for ALS, Defna Amato, and our nurse coordinator who keeps our clinic together, Mary Kelly. I want to take 1 or 2 minutes just to describe a special program that we have at the Penn Clinic, that it is my hope that one day every clinic will have a program like this. It is led by the pulmonologist of the group, Dr. Akravo, who you will note is the only person with a stethoscope around his neck on this slide. So he is a real doctor. He is a pulmonologist. Dr. Akravo heads up our Jay and Randy Fishman program for home-assisted ventilation. He is an expert in the pulmonary care of adults with neuromuscular diseases. So this is a specialty, excuse me for repeating that word, in the pulmonary world, where he has a specific interest in taking care of people with neuromuscular diseases. So the kinds of people whose pulmonary problems come from problems with the nerves or the muscles. Most pulmonologists actually focus on diseases of the lungs, and so they're not as skilled at taking care of people with ALS and other neurological respiratory problems. But we have this very special funded program where Jason, Dr. Akravo, I should say, takes excellent care of our patient population, whether they need a special machine to help them breathe or not. And he is expert at adjusting those machines to individual persons by using the data that he downloads from the machines to determine how they're interacting specifically with their own machine. And this is a program that we offer at Penn. Any of the people who come to our clinic are invited to see Dr. Akravo when they come to clinic. And he has made a real difference in the quality of pulmonary care that we're able to deliver to our patients. And this program was made possible by a generous donation from a former patient of ours, Mr. Jay Fishman. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think it's a really important program that we offer. And I hope that in the future, every single clinic will have a specialized program like that. So anyway, that's really what I wanted to say about our program at Penn. We're really happy to be involved in the platform trial. Looking forward to enrolling more patients and seeing this trial through to the end if there ever is an end. So that's what I wanted to say. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And obviously we'll have more time in the Q&A, but I also wanted to ask you as we start, should
Sure.
anyone have should anyone want to contact your site for enrollment in the platform trial, who would be the right point of contact and where is the information available?
So probably the best point of contact would be Adreja, and I can say her email address if that's the easiest way to do it. So let me go ahead and give you her email address, which is, let's see, it is, I'll spell it. It's A-D as in dog, R-E-E-J-A dot, actually, it might be easier if I put it in the chat.
That would be great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'll put it in the chat because she's our research coordinator and she's the one who has her finger on the pulse for everything that's going on at Penn with the platform trial. So I will put that in the chat if anyone is interested in contacting Penn.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
And now let's give our weekly update in terms of our enrollment. As you know, we are testing 4 drugs at this time. This is the general schema of the platform trial, which is really a perpetual adaptive trial, meaning that we will continue to add more drugs as they are developed. At this time, we are testing 4, zilucoplan, verdiperstat, CNM-Au8, and pridopidine. The randomization ratio active to placebo is 3:1. And if we want to kind of describe the patient experience, if you can click one more time, I'll just briefly mention that the patient experience begins at informed consent when you come to clinic to be screened for the inclusion into the trial. If all eligibility requirements are met, the participant will be able to be assigned to a regimen. So there is essentially a 25% chance of being assigned to any of the 4 active regimens. And then the next step would be to be assigned to active or placebo. And again, most people will receive active and 25% of people will receive placebo. And this process from informed consent to randomization cannot take longer than 6 weeks. I should say that we really try to keep it much shorter than that, but it's allowed up to 6 weeks. At this time, we're experiencing some delays still with our lab vendor Covance because they're having some supply challenges. But essentially, the goal would be really to keep this initial screening and randomization period brief, up to maybe a couple of weeks, but we allow up to 6 weeks. After that, participants can start receiving active or placebo for about 6 months. That's the placebo control period of the trial. And then at the end of that, people who complete that part of the trial, they'll be able to receive active drug long term as part of what's called the open label extension. So that's for people who complete the placebo controlled trial and want to receive active drug long term. Next slide. In terms of our numbers, I mean, first of all, I just want to thank all of you for all your support to the trial because we really are seeing fantastic enrollment and participation, and we are so grateful to be able to include hundreds of people now in the trial. Almost 600 people have signed informed consent, which was the first step that we just reviewed. Over 400 people have been assigned to a regimen or randomized within a regimen, and of many people, over 100 have already entered the open label extension, meaning that they have complete of those 410 who have been randomized within a regimen, 116 of them have already entered the open label extension because essentially they've already completed the randomized period and are now receiving active drug. In terms of sort of numbers by regimen, again, we are testing 4 drugs. You see that a little over 100 people have been randomized within regimens A, B, and C. That's more than regimen D because regimen D started later. But again, the chances of being assigned to any regimen are equal at this point. But A, B, and C are ahead simply because they were started earlier. As you can see here, for B and C, we already have 130 people randomized within those regimens. Regimen A as a slight, you can see here, it's fewer people within that, simply because there is a 2-week delay for receiving a vaccine. That's part of the protocol of Regimen A. So Regimen A really has the same, roughly the same numbers as B or C, but because of the delay due to the vaccination requirement, that's why the numbers look a little bit different. But essentially, as you can see here, because we're aiming to enroll a total of 160 people for each regimen. For B and C, we're almost there. We basically had 30 spots left for each of them, which is really great. And keep in mind that we want to continue to create more spots and always have the trial open and available for people to participate. So even when A, B, and C will be completed, we will have D ongoing, and we are working on launching E, the next regimen. Next slide. So as always, you can reach out to Catherine Small and Alison Bullat, who also are joining today as panelists. So thank you, Catherine and Alison, for being on this weekly webinar with us, and also for answering calls and emails from anyone really who wants to have a deeper, a more in-depth conversation about the trial during the week. Please feel free to contact Catherine and Alison anytime. Also, I see that Dr. Elman put the email of the coordinator at UPenn, which is great, in the chat. Also, if you have questions about how to contact this site or other sites, please email our patient navigators, and they can provide the email addresses for all the sites as well. Next slide. So we are working on a number of webinar ideas, as you have been hearing. We will have a few guest speakers over the summer. The names are listed here. We'll have Dr. Rosenfeld from Loma Linda University, Dr. Shafiq from the Barrow Neurological Institute, as well as Dr. Bedlak from Duke University. Each of these colleagues is an investigator, just like I am the investigator at MGH, and Dr. Elman at UPenn. And so they provide perspectives from their site, and so they'll tell us about their experience in the platform trial. And Dr. Bedlak will also focus on EAPs. So those are the upcoming guests, but we're working on scheduling more people. So hopefully the list will continue to grow, and hopefully we'll have as many speakers as possible over the summer. And then towards the end of the summer, we are hoping to have the biostatistics series that we've been talking about. We are working on getting all the slides approved so that we can then share them and present them to you during the webinar. Next slide. These are just helpful links for those of you who are new, and if you want to view the recordings of previous weekly webinars. We had other guest speakers in the past. You can see the entire schedule and recordings and slides on our website, as well as recordings of webinars about each drug that's been tested in the trial. Next slide. And of course, we have several more recordings of webinars. These are some of the things that we talked about during recent webinars, AMX35, as well as the overall clinical trial pipeline. That's the most recent webinar that Dr. Sukovic gave, and it's part of the NILS organization, and it's on the NILS website. So all of these are freely available, and they cover some of the most commonly asked questions during these webinars. Next slide. And I think that was it. So now we can move on to questions. And I think Alison will help us take questions from the audience.
Yes, I will. First question today, Dr. Elman, regarding open label extension, can you briefly explain how that works and where in the process people start to make that decision?
Sure, I'm happy to address that. So the open label extension is something that is discussed even at the original consent, during the original consent process for the trial. So patients who are consenting are aware of the open label extension portion of the trial from the get-go, from the very beginning. So it is my impression that most people start thinking about that even at the very beginning of the trial. And it's often an ongoing conversation during the trial. People, think about whether they think they might be benefiting from the regimen they're on, or if they think they're having any side effects from the drug they're taking, or whatever it is that they're taking. And I frequently get asked by participants do you think I'm on active or placebo? And I'm happy to tell them that I don't know. I'm glad I don't know. It's a protection for me because I can't keep a secret. So I'm afraid if I did know, I might spill beans. So it's a good thing that it's a double-blind trial, meaning that the individual participant doesn't know and I don't know. So that protects me from being able to accidentally tell someone what they're on. In our experience, the open label extension is a very attractive option for people, and people generally seem to want to participate in it, and that has been what's happened at our site. And folks seem to make that decision rather early on in the trial. That's been my experience. But the official decision is made, I think, I'm going to maybe get this wrong, so Dr. Paganoni, I'll defer to you, but I feel like it's about 2 weeks shy of their of the end of their active phase that they have to make that final decision. And then there's a special consent form for that. But
and there is a consent form, you're right, at week 16, but I also want to make sure that people know that they can always change their mind until week 24.
Yeah. So you always have agency to change your mind, particularly in a trial. But we personally haven't run into that, but people have been quite eager to participate in the open label extension. The other thing to know about the open label extension portion of the trial is that it is less labor intensive on the part of the participant than the active phase of the trial. So there aren't as many visits as there are during the active phase. There are still some required visits, but not as many. We keep tabs on you for safety purposes, but not as much is required. So that's also appealing after you've been through all that hard work of the active phase. So that's how it's gone at our site. And like I said, it's been very, very well received at our site.
Thank you. Dr. Paganoni, can you answer, is there an open label in Minnesota, or can you let people know the requirements for getting into the open label extension program?
So the main requirement for being able to enter the open label extension program is that somebody must have completed the 6 months of placebo-controlled trial in any of the available regimens. So there isn't an age limit. It's for adult patients, but there isn't an upper limit in terms of age. It's available at all sites, so including the Minnesota sites or really any site that participates in the platform trial. They also automatically offer the open label extension for all the regimens that they are offering. And to clarify, it's for everyone, not just the people who were previously on placebo or previously on active. It's for everyone who participated, whether they were on active or placebo during the placebo-controlled portion of the trial. They're all eligible to receive active drug in the open label extension.
Thank you. Another question for you, Dr. Paganoni. We have been talking a lot about expanded access. Do you have an update on that, or how many patients have been enrolled in the program?
Yeah, so we haven't spoken about expanded access today, and I want to differentiate that from open label extension. I wouldn't want there to be confusion. So the open label extension that we described today is officially part of the trial and helps us to tell if the drug is effective or not. And again, that's for people who have completed the placebo-controlled portion of the trial. Now, expanded access is something separate, completely separate, and it's essentially a companion that we're offering for small groups of patients that will allow them to have access to the drug only for people that are not eligible for the trial itself. So for those, we're literally about to enroll the first participants in the Biohaven Verdiperstat EAP. We are, as mentioned earlier in previous webinars, we are really looking forward to growing this program and really hopefully including more sites and more patients. And it's only because of funding limitations that we're starting with a small group of people. So we should enroll the first few participants very soon.
Wonderful. Thank you. Dr. Elman, we have a patient from Pence from your clinic. I think they should know this. What is the time since diagnosis exclusion for this trial in particular?
So it's 3 years since symptom onset that you need to be enrolled by that point. So at our site, and I imagine most people do this, we sort of pre-screen someone essentially before even talking to them about a trial. So if someone tells me that they're interested in being in trials, before I launch into any of the details of a trial, I will take a look at their chart and see when their symptom onset was, so that I can preface that conversation with saying, well, clinical trials might not be for you because, you've had disease for a long time, which might not necessarily be a bad thing, because it might mean that you're a very slowly progressive patient, which can be a very favorable thing in this disease. Or alternatively, if someone's had disease onset 18 months ago, I'll say, oh, this is good. It looks like you're eligible, so we should talk about this further. So at our site, we sort of pre-screen before we even have a serious conversation about trials.
Perfect. Do either of you have any suggestions of informing TSA if you want to fly with Regimen C as a carry-on?
We generally provide a letter. We can provide letters. We provided letters even for international participants. Generally, in my experience, it has worked. I haven't seen a problem with that. But again, obviously, it's, different TSA agents, I guess, might have a different opinion. But what I've seen is that it can work if you have a letter on letterhead.
Thank you. We have a question about open label extension. If 116 people have already entered the program, that means they finished the 6-month placebo-controlled portion of the trial. Have there been some positive results in the treatment? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We will actually, that's one of the questions that we want to address when we have the biostatistics webinar series. So essentially, as we will explain further, we cannot analyze the results of the trial until everyone who has been enrolled has completed the trial. So we don't analyze as we go, because that's actually not possible for several reasons, both for the scientific integrity of the trial, and also because there is a lot of data entry, data cleaning, and curation of the data. And so really, it could be actually misleading to base conclusions on sort of interim analysis or partial data, I guess, that's not being curated yet. So it's really, we will only be able to tell if the drug works or not after everyone has completed the 6 months. So we don't really have data on the results yet.
And if somebody was, for example, on regimen A during the placebo-controlled portion, can they pick another treatment for open label extension?
No, they can't. And that's because the open label extension is really an extension of the trial, but really very much part of the trial itself, and really serves an important scientific purpose, which is to monitor the safety and effectiveness of the drug long term. I also want to mention that there are some regulations about the minimum number of people that have been on a certain drug for at least 12 months before a certain drug can be approved. So in addition to the efficacy of the drug, there is a minimum amount of drug exposure that the FDA will require. And so by following the same participants on the drug for longer, that allows us to accumulate enough safety data so that should the drug be positive, hopefully that could be approved.
Regarding the expanded access program, if people are interested in that, who should they contact, and can they be in more than one expanded access program at the same time?
It would be good to contact Catherine and Alison again, and they could direct to the best people. But essentially, EAPs at this time, they are, again, very small, only available at a few sites. We are working hard on fundraising, trying to increase the number of sites and the number of people that are able to participate. Most EAPs actually limit the number of EAPs that you can be on. That's not universal. I would say there's a couple of EAPs that might allow participation in more than one, but most of them don't, for reasons that these are still investigational products, and so interactions with other drugs can create safety concerns. That's why, yeah.
Dr. Elman, I'm going to combine a couple of the questions that we have, if you could. Are you aware of any trials that involve patients that have symptoms longer than 3 years? And second part of that, is there a time in which you suggest to patients that they switch from regimens that they might be trying on their own to a clinical trial?
Good questions. Off the top of my head, I cannot think of any trials that include longer than 3-year duration that are active right now. If Dr. Paganoni knows of any, I would invite her to chime in right now. But
yeah, not off the top of my head, but there might be. There have been certainly some, but
yeah.
yeah.
But currently I can't think of any. And the second question that you asked, if an individual is taking sort of supplements on their own that they feel might be working, and they're considering being in a clinical trial, when do I advise them to try that? That's a really good question, actually, and it's one that comes up not infrequently. So I think it's a very individual kind of a decision to make, because I think it's important to take into consideration that anytime a person is in a clinical trial, it's an experiment. And there's a lot of unknowns in a clinical trial. So number one, it's placebo controlled. So nobody knows if they're getting the active drug or the placebo. And in addition, and more importantly, we do these trials because we don't actually know if the drug that we're studying works. So if we knew it worked, we wouldn't have to do the trial. So there's always a chance, number one, that it doesn't work. And there's also a chance, and unfortunately in the ALS community, we've seen this in the past, that the drug that we're studying could theoretically potentially do harm. We do everything that we can to protect against that possibility by having good preclinical data and by having data safety and monitoring boards that check safety labs and things like that all along the way. But being in a clinical trial is a very serious undertaking, and it involves a lot of effort on the part of the participant and a small but not zero amount of risk. So if a person thinks that they're doing very well on some sort of regimen that they've designed for themselves that may include whatever it is that they feel is working, then I think it can be a very difficult decision to decide to abandon that and in favor of a clinical trial, because there are no guarantees out there that whatever we might give them, even under the best of intentions, is going to be better than what they've found. And I think that, for example, one of the upcoming guests, Dr. Bedlack, is a proponent of every person being in their own clinical trial. And that may mean using supplements or things that they think are good. I am a proponent of data, and I love to see big trials where we get big data so that we can answer questions. So I'm a huge fan of these big trials. And I know what I would do if it were me. So that question is easy for me to answer for myself. But I think that every individual needs individual guidance, and I don't put my own, what I would do isn't really relevant for an individual. So it's a very, it tends to be a very interesting conversation every time it comes up. I don't think that was really an answer, but I think it just more outlines that these things are not straightforward, and there isn't necessarily one answer that works for everybody.
Thank you very much. Dr. Paganoni, could an open label extension participant also be concurrently involved in an EAP?
Well, that's not possible, because EAPs by definition are testing investigational products. And so in the context of the clinical trial, including the OLE, which is very much part of the clinical trial itself, we cannot allow participants to be exposed to other investigational products that are being tested in other trials. That's true for the vast majority of, if not all, I would say, clinical trials. And that's because using basically more than one drug at the same time would confound the results and would prevent us from answering the scientific questions that the trial is intended to answer, which is whether the one drug under evaluation works or not.
We're going to get through a couple more questions here. Dr. Paganoni, can you touch on, there's a question saying that the HEALEY Platform Trial is new in its way of working with expanded access programs, and do you think that will be the future of how pharma companies do trials? And I think that's really important, because we don't want people who have symptoms longer than 3 years to feel like there's nothing that they can do.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's one of the main reasons for promoting EAPs. For EAPs or expanded access, we certainly are doing a lot of work in talking to industry, companies, and different groups in trying to promote that concept. So it is certainly our hope that all future trials will include that as a companion program. Certainly, we're working towards that.
So if someone was offered an EAP to tofersen in the fall, would they have to stop their open label extension?
Yeah, I believe that would be the case, yes.
And are supplements permitted in trials?
It depends on the supplement, and we have a detailed list specifically for this trial. So the general principle is that if a supplement is being studied in a separate clinical trial, so it's an investigational product, really an experimental drug, it won't be allowed, but sort of regular wellness supplements like a multivitamin, for example, or other more common supplements may be allowed. So it really depends, and there is a detailed list.
Thank you. And I know we're coming up on our time. Just one final question. And I do want to acknowledge that people have submitted questions about other trials, but we may not be able to accept those today because we're short on time. But I did want to ask you, Dr. Paganoni, there's a question about open label extension being available for all participants. There's confusion about if it includes active drug as well as placebo. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, it's for everyone. And to clarify, people who complete the placebo-controlled trial will not know at that time whether they were on active or placebo. And the open label extension is offered to everyone. Now, at the very end of the entire trial, we will reveal, we will be able to tell people if they were on active or placebo, but again, not immediately. So everyone will be eligible for the open label extension.
Perfect. I think we got all of the open label extension questions. And so I think that we're going to end this session today. Dr. Elman, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to everybody who joined us on the webinar. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.